The following program is brought to you in spooky vision. Be warned, all scenes will be accompanied by pictures of Barbra Streisand.
Back to the Terrence and Phillip Halloween special.
That fight was absolutely ghoulish, Terrence.
Streisand, Streisand was... Streisand will never leave the Democratic Party. I don't think that anyone of that generation that's old guard is going to accept the reality, at least not the secular ones. What I believe to be the reality. I could be wrong. I just don't think that party's going to be saved in terms of the squad being in the Democratic Party, the fact that that could happen in this country. Forget about the Democrats. The fact that any American party... A lot of us were trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, and then they got those other two ones, and then it was like, fuck. And I saw this when I was a communist. I think I mentioned this in another video, so I'll say it really quick. We were pandering to, naturally we didn't like the war, and so we started, we kind of became, I don't want to say we, actually to a certain degree I did too. At the time, as a young man, became very Islamophilic. In terms of speaking favorably of individual Muslims, if not entire Muslim nations, and even then I knew, well, look, we don't like the direction the war is going in, or don't like the war at all. And we felt that Muslims were potentially going to be persecuted, which on a very small level, that was the case for a short time. A Sikh in Mesa got shot because they thought he was a Muslim. If that idiot had any idea that not only are they not Muslim, these are people who knew better than we did that you do not want a Muslim majority in whatever country you're in. Poor guy had bought something at the place, no less. It's a famous story. It got international news in Mesa at that Circle K that's over by that. Remember the mountain with the tower on it on top? So tragic. The Seekers are people that we can relate to, big time. So it's like, that guy got shot. Some stupid, emotionally driven redneck, I don't even bash on rednecks. It's just, how the culture is. You see a turban, shit, it's one of them, fucking idiot. Not that it would have been okay if he shot him because he was a Muslim either. I'll never, ever be that type. I'll never say he's a Muslim, Anyway, to get back to the whole thing, diaspora matters. Jews are always going to be divided on. I'm not comparing Barbra Streisand to this. Okay, I'm going to say it again. I'm not comparing Barbra Streisand to this. However, there were Jews who helped the Inquisition. Pablo Cristiani in Spain. Cristiani, yeah, not shit. Pablo Cristiani, I forgot his given name, but he was Jewish. Raised Jewish household, not just of blood, but, as were my ancestors. When you talk about a complicated history, so Alifi used to be Galifi, and before that, it was Khalifi. I always assumed that those people were Muslim, because Caliph, they literally had the date of the thing they were trying to establish. Although I don't think the Moors used the word caliphate. They didn't particularly like the caliphate. The Moors were, if you had to live under a Muslim rule, if you had to live under Muslim rule in history, the Moors were the ones that you wanted to live under. They were a lot more interested in getting the taxes paid than they were interested in meddling in your personal life, unlike the Caliphate. Still, they still invaded. My friend, Sephardic history teacher, he says to me, Right. The family history thing that I'm going to is relevant, but bear with me when I go on rants like this because they'll make sense in time. You're probably thinking, Seth, shut the fuck up. Why are you? You will probably figure out why it is before I have to actually say, okay, so because when I go on about like my whole family history that I found out about and how it ties into where I happened to be going towards anyway, it is really weird because all the shit I talked about lineages on both sides of my family and where they seem to go and whatnot, I didn't know any of that. I didn't know any of that before I started conversion. But again, it seems like I'm so fucking all over the place, but it does tie in to the way I see the world. And I suppose one of the reasons why I'm talking about my own personal ties with it is because that's a lot more interesting than me giving you a friggin' history lesson. Why is a history lesson relevant to this? This will make sense. I promise. You may not agree with me at the end. It all ties into why I chose to vote the way I do, why I chose to affiliate the way I do outside of I suppose Jewish interests and whatnot. Another thing I wanted to say is diaspora issues, meaning Jewish people who are not in Israel or who hold citizenship in other countries or happen to live in other countries. We're always going to be divided when it comes to diaspora stuff. You're always going to have people who hang on. There were Jewish, this might be hard to believe, there were Jewish Nazis up until the point that Hitler kicked them out. And the Nazis, the German Workers' Party, was on the record anti-Semitic longer than Hitler was. And there were Jews in the party. And then Hitler came out, kicked them. That I am not comparing Barbra Streisand to them, for the record, okay? That's not what I'm doing. It's just an example of how extreme diaspora politics can be with Jews. He asked me my last name, or I told him in some relevant way, I don't remember. He immediately says to me, "Your name is Jewish." I'm like, "That's cute, you're saying I'm like family. That's adorable. It means a lot to me." He goes, I said something like coy like that, and he said, No. It's not Jewish. It was changed from something else." How do you know that? Because look it up. I look it up. Now here's the thing. I'm still amazed that he recognized that right away. Like, when I looked it up and I looked at the index of all the Jewish names that were changed from something else, I was shocked. I'm like, how the fuck did you know that like that? But he was right. It's complicated though, because the Moors had invaded, we're looking at half of a millennium, or longer actually. What had happened is the Muslims invaded, and names that were normally recognized as Islamic, Moors invaded. Sicily was a Muslim caliphate for the better of 450 or 500 years, something like that. Not 900 years. Sorry. And names that were before recognized as Islamic had simply become recognized as Italian. You see the same thing in Spain. Ishmael is a very popular Catholic Spanish name. Why would a Catholic name their kid after Ishmael in the Bible? I mean, you look at Muslims, of course, flipped the two characters around when Muhammad... Don't. You'll make this thing so long. Because they have ancestors named Ishmael. And you have the name, what's the other one? The one from Moby Dick, really popular among Mexicans. Ahab, very popular name among Hispanic people in Spain and Mexico. These are not Catholic names. They are now, because time does things, So he says to me, "Your name was changed from something else." I'm like, "Well, what was my name changed from?" He goes, "I don't know. But it was something else, and your ancestors had to change it because the Inquisition gave them a option. They said, you can leave Okay, well, first they had to push the French out, the Normans out, and then when they did, it was like, okay, it wasn't like cruel like the Spanish were. It was more like, okay, look, we have to have a national religion. It's the world that we lived in, because the idea of not having a national religion was alien to them, and they understood why. There was a reason for this. This wasn't just religious zealotry and psychosis. This was, I'm going to get into Barbra Streisand. Brevity is not my talent. Barbara, so they changed it, and typically, I asked him how he knew they were Jewish. He goes, that was one of the names that Jewish people chose when they changed their names. So I looked it up on this index, still in these old parchment, and wow, that list is long. The island was 10% Jewish once. And that's you know how unusual it is for a Jewish population to be that high? And there were synagogues all over the place in Sicily. And finally the Inquisition said, no more mosques, no more synagogues. You can leave. And I don't think Spain gave them the same option, but they picked their pockets on the way out. Sicily didn't do that. I don't think any of the Italians did that. They said, you can take what's yours, and leave, but you gotta, it's tragic what happened to the Muslims, really. And I'm not fond of Islam, but I would never wish this on, any Muslim population. They gave them an island somewhere up north. I don't remember exactly where it was. And like within a short period of time, some northern marauding army, I believe they were Slavs, completely destroyed. They killed everybody, looted them, and they were no more. It's like, ugh. And I don't think the Sicilian establishment had anything to do with it. I think it was just chance. My ancestors decided to stay. And where's a Jew gonna go? It's like you have to be under the thumb of, before the state of Israel existed, you had to be under the thumb of whatever government and at the mercy of whatever government you lived under. And no matter how good it is, many, many Muslim kings were wonderful to Jewish people. But that guy's going to die. And his piss fuck son is going to take over at some point. And usually, brats of their fathers don't like the same people. And even if he does, he's going to have a brat at some point. That's an oversimplification of it. The Sicilians did not trust us if we remained non-Catholic. And while I believe that is wrong, I understand that way of thinking. My ancestors made a choice. So they changed their name. It was probably Levi or Halevi. That does not mean I am a Levi, by the way, even if I could prove it. Because my lineage is broke. My maternal lineage I can't prove. Sorry, my paternal lineage is broken in terms of the moment you have a child with a woman who is not a Jew, that lineage is broke. I don't think, according to Jewish law, that I could claim Levi lineage, even if I could prove all that other stuff before. Doesn't matter, I don't need to. Although I wouldn't mind if my son, he's not Jewish though, he's Zera Yisrael. There's a difference in, I'm not gonna get into that. I hope he does become someday, but that's his decision. Proving that over a span of almost 1,000 years, I get tired easy. And I don't need that. Now, I don't need to prove about my mother's lineage, which I'd mentioned before, because even if my theory is completely wrong, it doesn't change anything. I'm legal now. Mayor, you said you weren't gonna. Okay. It goes into what I was saying about Barbra Streisand, and I'm using her. I'm pick on her, or not pick on her, because I don't judge my ancestors who did what they did harshly, because I've never been in that position. Yes, it does kind of look like they had a high, believe it or not, my family had high esteem in Sicily once. I don't know the details of it, except that they were on the parliament. That's got to be hard to walk away from and go into the black moonless night of your future, not knowing what the next country is going to treat you like. It's got to be, you know. Who knows what, you know. So they just said, okay, fine, we'll become Catholic. And my family remained Catholic ever since, until the first apostate. Well, the Catholic Church came along. My father, he would have been so much better off if he'd stayed Catholic. He needed a priest. No man needed a priest like he did. I told him that. I don't think he didn't like it when I told him that, but he couldn't argue it either. It's like, I don't want to talk too much about, but so that was that. And when I say all this story about my family history and theoretical family history, we have dual loyalty, and there are times when there is a reason to have a problem with that. Not usually. There's no conflict of interest with Israel and America right now. Quite the opposite. If Israel goes, if Israel's overrun and destroyed, the Caliphate are not going to stop. And they use that. I'm not being like historically weird by saying that. This is what they call themselves. I'm not just talking about Hamas. I'm talking about the entire apparatus of the Arab Muslim world. Except Saudi Arabia. We actually may be able to be friends with them, given enough time and patience and the right energy. The prince is not stupid. And I'm hoping that the guy So this is a very interesting time in history, as it is scary, but it's interesting too. Because what the world we're going into is going to be. I'll talk about Donald Trump here, because I've kind of like, for context, and I'm trying not to piss you off. I'm really trying not to piss you off. You have to get one thing out of the way about the way I think. In the way many of us think, not just Jews, many of his supporters. There is a camp that he's the friggin' Messiah. That's funny though. There was a Jewish joke in Israel about that compares him with Cyrus, and we actually call him HaMashiach. In the Bible, he's called that, and he's a goy. Mashiach doesn't mean what people think it means. I made a video earlier, and I was like, oh, I tend to ramble, and I know that, so I like literally don't post shit unless I edit it for, you know. There's a camp that says that thinks he's the friggin' Messiah, and I went on a rant about how that doesn't mean the same thing to us, and I'm like, that's besides the point. Okay, the point is that the thinks he's like sent by God to fix him. The QAnon tended to be like that, but there was a bunch of other camps that were basically similar. I got nothing in common with that camp. There's another camp that basically says, okay, well, I like him better than the other one. In the last, it was Clinton the first time, and then it was Biden the next time. And then there's the ones that said, this is the position you're putting us into. We're voting for this guy, and I'm closer to that one. Because I went on a completely irrelevant tangent that I'm going to leave in the video, I think. Okay, wait, I had a point. It's easy for people to pigeonhole everybody into, the right dude too. Everybody who voted for Clinton was woke. Actually, we didn't use the word woke back then, it was SJW. And then I gotta say, I am proud of this one. I don't like terms in politics where people feel like there's a term that asserts that you're right about something before you even say it. And the right did it too. They had a term called red pill. And I told people, guys, gotta stop saying that. What you're effectively saying is, I'm asserting that I'm right in going to, before I even make my case. I'm like, guys, they're like, well, yeah, but I like it. I'm like, I know you like it. That's why I'm telling you that you got to get over the fact that you like it. It's not a good thing to say. It's arrogant, and it's not going to age well. And I'm happy to say that died a natural death. The woke were doing the same thing by calling themselves woke. Before, we were calling, when the left went off the rails, and I saw it in real time because I was still part of it at the time as it was happening. And they used the word woke to describe themselves. And they started saying SJW. I remember when somebody explained to me what SJW meant. And I was like, well, that's good, because that's a term that would separate, because I don't think it's fair to call them liberals. It's not fair to liberals at all. And that's why I said SJW for years. They did an amazing job taking woke and flipping it around and weaponizing it against them. Because woke is just like red pill for leftists at the time. I'm right, but I don't have to prove that. I'm just right. And now I'm going to tell you why you're a white supremacist, homophobic, something else-ophobic, and everything else that falls before that suffix. And it's like, don't do that shit. And I'll never, ever be one to do that shit. It's like, make your fucking case. Make it 1,000 times if you have to, but you don't assert that you're right. Everyone thinks that they're right, or at least are presuming to, or at least pretending to think they're right. Well, they lie. There's always those two. But you don't get to declare yourself the one that's right between two contentious issues. And the right did it and the left did it. I told my right-wing friends, this was before I discovered that some of them were Q. One of them in particular comes to mind. 4 years I spent de-radicalizing. Well, I should say, doing my part to de-radicalize him. I don't want to say that it was me that did it. It's so arrogant. But I was actively like, dude, I'll have to tell that story another time. And we have a coin with Trump next to Cyrus's image. It's kind of an inside Jewish joke, but we do mean it in a very Diet Coke kind of way. Because I'm not doing this to convince you. I'm doing this to tell you where I'm at. You're not Jewish. You're not going to. You shouldn't, by the way. You shouldn't have the same priorities that I do. And in that sense, you may see this as a conflict of interest, and that's okay. Personally, if I was back in history when Jews were emancipated in the European world and given full citizenship and rights, I probably would be against it. Maybe. Then again, if it wasn't for that, Israel as we know it wouldn't exist. So I'm glad I'm not being put in that position. There's a reason many Jews were against emancipation, because they feared above all that it meant assimilation, The Abraham Accords were a very big deal, and I know you don't follow this. And I'm not going to squeeze everything that both represented and accomplished. The reason Donald Trump accomplished that was not because he's a genius. The reason Donald Trump accomplished the Abraham Accords was not because he's Superman or even a good person necessarily. The reason he accomplished this, and no other politician in this country could, was because nobody was holding strings on him, because we have a political structure now, and I will resent the Bush camp for the rest of my life for this. We've always had a problem in America where special interests pull influence over the politician when it's supposed to be the other way around. The theory is supposed to be, if you're a corporation, you give money to the person who has a platform, that's good for you. That's the theory. But we know that's not how it works. Hillary Clinton is actually, there might have been someone that's beaten her by now, but in 2016, Hillary Clinton had them all beat, had Bush beat. I called her Bush in a skirt, which I just realized that could be taken as an innuendo. Fuck, I just thought about that. I was appalled that many people were getting behind her. I'm like, she's another Bush. Why? Do you want another 4 years of Bush? Because that's basically, she's a Democrat, but anyway. So as you probably know, Bush changed the laws on things like soft money, on how a corporation, it was under him that they made money into speech. So a corporation could give money in any way, as much as they want, when they want, and with no asterisks whatsoever, because it's free speech, because a corporation is a person. That fucked our system up so bad. Because now, a person is a person, and maybe money is speech in that case. If it is, then you need to stop checking my bag for it when I'm at the airport. Anyway, telling me how much I can carry. It's my free speech, motherfucker. But no, they never did that with it. Anyway, they weren't interested in that. So anyway, politicians are not terrible people necessarily. But you have to be reelected to accomplish anything. And you can't be reelected if you don't do what your corporate sponsors want. When I said Hillary Clinton was worse than Bush, I mean in terms of having a platform, money coming from a corporate interest that disagrees with that platform, and after which you change your platform. We need draconian laws against that, but the problem is the people who benefit from that now control the strings. That's not conspiracy theory, this is observable, Trump is the first president we had that doesn't have those strings. Yes, that means that he is his own puppeteer of his, he controls himself, and what his intentions are there, that's another topic. Am I worried about him as an individual? Because as a president goes, yes, but not as much about somebody who's under corporate interest, because they're going. A corporation has one purpose, and corporations are not evil. They're just corporations. They have priorities, and that priority is to make a profit. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you have to understand where the interest of the state and the interest of the corporation conflicts, much like the interest of a Jewish national and a American national might conflict. That have to be something people be realistic about, and unfortunately we're accused of that when there is no conflict. The Abraham Accords were possible because there was no one that Trump had to worry about pulling their money away. The Arab world, many countries that were willing to be very reasonable became reasonable because he gave them incentive to be reasonable. 4 countries that I never thought. And Saudi Arabia was getting ready before October 7th, too. The North Korea thing, I was very impressed by. I don't know if much would have come of it because of the nature of that country, but I was like, wow, this impressed me. This isn't to make you feel better about Trump. This is to tell you where my head was at. Trump is a loose cannon, or at least appears to be. This is going to be hard for you to accept. I want somebody who has the appearance of somebody a little unstable. Because right now in the war that's going on between the 2 major powers, America, Russia, and to a certain degree, I don't believe, by the way, that Trump is a Russian shill, and the reason, it's too much to get into here, a Russian proxy. I do believe that many people are, and I do believe the best thing in propaganda is to accuse somebody of something that you're guilty of. Won't get into it now. another time. I am just as worried about Russia as you are, believe me. My wife was born in the Soviet Union. Yeah, but this isn't Soviet Union. Yes, it is. Yes, it fucking is. They put a different sign up. Putin has the exact same policies that the Soviet Union had before Khrushchev, or even after Khrushchev. You know, I mean, it was actually pretty bad up until the end, in terms of everybody who has a position of influence was KGB, especially Putin. Putin, his particular position in the KGB, that's interesting shit. He immediately started, once he could, attacking the former Soviet proxy states to annex them. He brought back the Soviet anthem. That was a terrifying day for a lot of Russians. So make no mistake, we hate the same people. In the big picture, I mean, you know. And there's nothing a bigger liability right now than a corporate shill. Because a corporation doesn't think about these kind of things. It's not in the nature of a corporate entity when they make a profit. And if they give money, and the things that are good for the country are not always good for a particular corporation. I'm sure I don't have to explain that. Corporate interests do not typically benefit from, at least not in the immediate, money from the Arab world being dispersed to countries. The country does, America does. They, not war, but where is it? I'm at a loss now. What is it you call it when a country is not at war, but they're hostile? Well, hostile. When two countries are hostile, that controls the market because they don't trade. So somebody can benefit somewhere else by setting up shop there. And that makes the product more expensive. Things like this, you know. You understand how that works. There's one thing, by the way, let me say something Trump didn't do that he said he would do that upset me. But I wasn't surprised because, again, when he got elected, I didn't vote for him. And the first time. And the one thing that he said that I was like, but if he does this, it'll all be worth it. And it was dissolving the turfs that insurance companies keep so they can keep their prices high. That was disappointing. That's the one thing that is one thing he said he would do that he didn't do. But that was like, oh, if he did that, you know. This is not a nice and neatly packaged black and white the empire versus the republic kind of thing. The more you learn, the more complicated it all gets. And if there was another person that we had to choose from that didn't have these strings attached, corporate strings, I would definitely be, I'm going to be honest, I do like Trump's resilience. Anyone else by this point, I wouldn't have made it this far. I'd have freaking lost it. I'm sure of it. Let me tell you about what I think of his psychology. When I started studying the difference between a vulnerable narcissist and a grandiose narcissist, they're very different. And you know, I first heard it on Joe Rogan, and then I started. There are people in my family that are vulnerable narcissists. A vulnerable narcissist, I'm the best that there is. You have no friggin' idea. If you knew what I could do, I'm the best. You'd never even look at somebody else to get this done. I'm the guy that gets things done. And I'm going to tell you all about that time that I killed a bear with my, bare hands, and I had to do it because I was just working. I had to save all these people. Okay, that guy says that shit. He doesn't believe a word of it. He wants to believe it. He's trying to convince himself that it's true. But there's this part of his brain, he can't get that idea all the way. So he tries to convince you to give him the validation so that you believe it and give him the validation, and that'll make him believe it. That's a vulnerable narcissist. Most of them you've met probably. A vulnerable narcissist is dangerous, potentially, because you hold up a mirror and you show them in any way that what they're saying about themselves is not true. They get very angry at you. Not at themselves for not being this thing that they're trying to be. They get mad at you for showing it to them. Now, some of them will say mean things to you. Some of them will get violent, because at least they can prove that they can hurt somebody. Most won't, but that's probably because we have laws and penalties. A grandiose narcissist, on the other hand, they say all that shit, and they believe it. They're less dangerous, because it is damn near impossible to knock them off of that high horse. They believe everything about it. They also tend to not be vindictive. They'll tell you they're vindictive. Pragmatically, Trump is a grandiose narcissist. No question in my mind. Nature makes these people, just as they make psychopaths. There's a reason that they exist. And you're thinking, well, why would we have them? You wouldn't want to live in a world without them. Now, whether you necessarily want one of them to be president is another matter. You definitely don't want one of them to be an absolute dictator. You would not. I mean, you don't want anyone to be, actually. But you wouldn't want somebody who wasn't either. That's why dictatorships are terrible. And no, I don't think Trump can ever, A, I don't think he's going for dictatorship. B, if he is, and I don't see reason to believe he is, I don't think he could accomplish it at all. I don't think his base would allow it. I think that, plus we have 4 branches of government for a reason. It's an interesting thing historically, 4 branches. When the ancient Israeli state existed, they had 4 branches too. I remember I figured that out on my own. You had the monarchy, you had the Sanhedrin, you had the Kohanim. I always put that in there when I shouldn't. Kohanim, and then you had the Nevi. Very different 4 branches, but 4 branches. Anyway, my point is balance of power is important. And that's why we still have a stable balance of power. Because forget about whether Trump would be a dictator if he could or wants to be. We've definitely had presidents that wanted to be. No doubt in my mind that if they were given the opportunity, they would have. They could be dictators, but it never happened. We have a system still, thank God. We have a system. Not possible as of now. Now, theoretically, there are ways. Nothing is impossible, but I know what would have to be involved to make that happen. The days of Caesar Augustus are over. The days where you can use one national, the days of the Reichstag and being burnt down and Hitler saying, I will temporarily take this power, the Star Wars shit. That's right where they got that, I'm sure you know. Hitler said, oh my God, Reichstag has been burned down. I will take this authority of absolute control over everything just for now. Goring, the fat guy, Hitler's guy, actually said in Nuremberg, we had no plans on letting go of power. He didn't admit this. He didn't admit that they started the fire in the parliament, Reichstag parliament, He didn't admit that. But he did admit we had no plans on letting go of power. Once we had it, we were going to hold on to it. Very strange how quickly he admitted that when asked to. Very, unapologetically. It's weird. You would have thought that he'd have lied about it, right? Anyway, that is a very superficial picture of where I'm at and why I've made the choice I did. I am not saying, see, so you need to think like I do. You have different priorities, different way that you see the world. And if there were a road where ours converged in the way we think, it's distant, probably long after the election. And that's fine. I'll never come down on you for the decision you've made. This does not mean I am saying, so we have nothing else to discuss. Hell no, this is fascinating shit. Hearing where you're coming from is fascinating shit. And I hope you feel the same way. Because again, if we get to a point where we try to convince each other, we have to understand how each other thinks. And I think you get that now. It looks like you get that now. So, good. Till the next exchange.